Imagine a glittering ballroom, a locked safe, a vanished diplomat's secrets hidden in plain sight. What if a single footprint could unravel a theft, or a whispered phrase could expose a murderer? Join Hercule Poirot, the master detective, as he guides you through 10 gripping mysteries, each revealing a vital lesson in detection. From a stolen sapphire in a Sussex manor to a poisoned truffle in a London patisserie, a murder on the Orient Express to a blackmail plot in Monte Carlo, Poirot weaves a tapestry of clues, observation, logic, empathy, and timing to solve crimes that baffled the police. Can you spot the smudge that betrays a thief? Hear the lie in a casual remark. Uncover the motive behind a mask. In Hercule Poirot's top 10 tips for amateur detectives, every chapter is a puzzle. Each clue a challenge, leading to a final, elegant deduction in an Oxford bookshop. Dare to see through Poirot's eyes. Will you solve the mystery before the truth is revealed? Chapter 1. The Power of Observation. Seeing what others miss. The rain fell in a relentless drizzle over the sprawling grounds of Ashburn Manor, its grey veil softening the edges of the ancient oaks that lined the drive. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat despite the damp, stepped from the chauffeured car and adjusted his hat with a precise flick. His moustache, waxed to perfection, gleamed under the faint glow of the manor's lanterns. He had been summoned to this remote Sussex estate by Lady Eleanor Ashburn, whose urgent telegram spoke of a crisis: the disappearance of the star of Seraphine, a sapphire necklace of staggering value, during a weekend gathering of high society. As Poirot entered the grand foyer, the air was thick with tension. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms across the marble floor, and the gathered guests, lords, ladies, and a smattering of ambitious socialites whispered in hushed tones. Lady Eleanor, a statuesque woman with silver hair pinned in an elegant chignon, greeted him with a strained smile. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heaven you've come. The necklace, it vanished last night during the ball. The police are useless, poking about with no finesse. I need your ... unique talents." Poirot inclined his head, his green eyes sharp. "Madame, rest assured, Hercule Poirot shall restore order. But first, I must see, I must observe. Tell me, if you please, the events of the evening." Lady Eleanor recounted the night, a glittering ball to celebrate her late husband's legacy, attended by 30 guests. The star of Seraphine, a family heirloom with a sapphire the size of a quail's egg, had been displayed in a glass case in the drawing room. At midnight, when the case was opened for a closer viewing, the necklace was gone. No locks were broken, no windows forced. The guests, all vetted by Lady Eleanor's meticulous staff, were above suspicion, or so she claimed. Poirot's first act was to inspect the drawing room. The space was opulent, with velvet drapes and a parquet floor polished to a mirror's sheen. The glass case stood on a mahogany pedestal, its lock intact. He circled it slowly, his gloved fingers tracing the air as if sketching invisible clues. The room buzzed with the chatter of guests, who lingered like actors awaiting their cue. Poirot's gaze darted from face to face, noting a young viscount's fidgeting hands, a dowager's overly loud laugh, and a footman's hesitant step as he refilled champagne flutes. Observation, mes amis, Poirot murmured to himself, is the art of seeing what others ignore. He knelt beside the case, his eyes catching a faint smudge on the glass fingerprint, perhaps, but too faint to confirm without tools. Instead, he turned his attention to the chandelier above, its crystals winking in the firelight. Something about their arrangement struck him as odd. One crystal, near the edge, hung slightly askew, its facet catching the light differently. He filed the observation away, his mind a vault of details. Lady Eleanor introduced him to the key figures: Lord Reginald Carver, a bluff financier with a penchant for brandy; Miss Clara Beaumont, a debutante with doe-like eyes and a nervous habit of twisting her pearl bracelet; and Mr. Julian Harrow, an art dealer whose smile was as polished as his cufflinks. Poirot listened as each recounted their version of the evening, their stories polished but not identical. Lord Carver swore he'd been at the card table all night. Miss Beaumont claimed she'd danced until midnight. And Mr. Harrow insisted he'd been discussing a Gainsborough with a guest in the library. Poirot requested to see the guest bedrooms, a suggestion that raised Lady Eleanor's brows. The bedrooms, but the theft occurred here, in the drawing room. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Madame, the crime is not confined to one room. The truth, it hides in the corners of human behavior. Reluctantly, she agreed, and Poirot, accompanied by a skeptical butler named Hodges, began his tour. In Miss Beaumont's room, Poirot noted a single glove on the dresser, its partner missing. The glove was silk, embroidered with tiny roses, and its absence intrigued him. In Lord Carver's suite, a cigar stub smouldered in an ashtray, its brand foreign to the manor's stock. Mr. Harrow's room was pristine, save for a faint scent of lavender oil, unusual for a man of his demeanour. Each detail was a thread in Poirot's mental tapestry, woven with care. Back in the drawing-room, Poirot requested a ladder to inspect the chandelier. The guests exchanged puzzled glances as he climbed, his movements deliberate despite his small stature. He reached for the misaligned crystal, and there, nestled among its fellows, was the star of Seraphine, its sapphire glinting like a captive star. Gasps filled the room, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. The necklace, it was not stolen. To be taken away, he said. It was hidden, to be retrieved later. Now, we must ask, by whom and why? The guests erupted in protests, each denying involvement. Poirot's eyes scanned the room, settling on a young maid, Elsie, who stood by the door, her hands clasped tightly. Her apron was slightly askew, and a faint blush coloured her cheeks. Mademoiselle Elsie, Poirot said gently, perhaps you can assist me. You were in this room last night. Oui, Elsie stammered. I was serving drinks, sir. I didn't touch the case. Her eyes flicked to the chandelier, a fleeting glance that Poirot caught like a hawk. He stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. You see, mademoiselle, the chandelier is high, too high for most to reach without a ladder. But you are tall, and you were here when the case was opened. Tell me, what did you see? Under Poirot's steady gaze, Elsie's resolve crumbled. Tears welled as she confessed. It was for my brother, sir. He's sick, and the hospital bills. I was to hide the necklace for someone who promised to pay me. I didn't know who, I swear. They slipped me a note, told me to put it in the chandelier during the chaos of the ball. Poirot nodded, his expression softening. And this note, you have it still. Elsie produced a crumpled paper from her pocket, its handwriting elegant but unsigned. Poirot read it silently, then turned to the guests. The note instructs Elsie to hide the necklace, but it does not name the mastermind. Yet the paper itself speaks. It smells of lavender oil, a scent I found in only one room. All eyes turned to Mr. Harrow, whose smile faltered. This is absurd, he blustered. I know nothing of this. Poirot held up a hand. Monsieur Harrow, your room betrays you. The lavender oil, it is not common here. And your expertise in art, it extends to gems, does it not? You saw the star of Seraphine, not as a jewel, but as a means to an ender. Sale on the black market, perhaps. Harrow's face paled, but Poirot continued, relentless. You chose Elsie because she was desperate, a young woman whose brother's illness made her vulnerable. You instructed her to hide the necklace during the ball, planning to retrieve it later when suspicion had faded. But you did not account for Hercule Poirot, who sees what others miss. The room was silent as Harrow's shoulders slumped. It was a moment of weakness, he admitted. The necklace, it could have secured my future. Lady Eleanor's face was a mask of fury, but Poirot's gaze remained on Elsie. Mademoiselle, your heart was in the right place, but your actions were misguided. You will face consequences, but I shall speak for you. The necklace was returned to its case, and Harrow was escorted away by the local constable who had arrived at Poirot's discreet summons. Lady Eleanor clasped Poirot's hand, her relief palpable. How did you know, Monsieur Poirot? The chandelier, the note how? Poirot tapped his temple. The little grey cells, madame, they are never idle, but it begins with observation. The chandelier's crystal was not aligned, a detail others ignored. The scent of lavender, the missing glove, the maid's nervous glance, these were the signposts to the truth. To be a detective, one must see not just with the eyes, but with the mind. As the guests dispersed, Poirot lingered, gazing at the chandelier. He addressed the reader directly, his voice clear in the prose. You, who seek to unravel mysteries, begin here. Observe the world as if every detail is a clue. The teacup out of place, the glance too long, the scent that does not belong, these are the threads of truth. Train your eyes, and the world will reveal its secrets. The chapter closed with the manor settling into quiet, the rain easing to a gentle patter. Elsie, though facing a minor charge, was spared harsh punishment at Poirot's urging. Her brother's care secured by Lady Eleanor's charity. The star of Seraphine gleamed once more, a testament to the power of seeing what others miss. Poirot, satisfied, prepared for his next lesson, knowing that observation was but the first step in the art of detection. Chapter 2. The little grey cells, harnessing the mind's potential. The fog hung low over London's cobbled streets, curling around the gaslights like a conspirator's whisper. Hercule Poirot sat in the cosy warmth of Madame Dubois Petit, a haven of buttery aromas and delicate confections in the heart of Bloomsbury. The establishment, renowned for its exquisite chocolates, had become the stage for a sinister drama. A single truffle, laced with arsenic, had claimed the life of a prominent barrister, Mr. Archibald Vance. The police, baffled by a lack of obvious suspects, had summoned Poirot, whose reputation for untangling the impossible preceded him. Madame Dubois, a plump woman with flour-dusted hands and a trembling lip, met Poirot at a corner table. Monsieur Poirot, it is a catastrophe. My shop, my reputation ruined. Who would poison a truffle? My truffles. Her voice cracked, and she dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Poirot, his moustache impeccably symmetrical, patted her hand. Calm, madame. The truth, it is like a perfect soufflé. It requires patience and precision. Now, tell me all. The facts were sparse. Mr. Vance had visited the patisserie the previous morning, purchasing a box of 6 truffles, including a rare lavender-infused variety exclusive to Madame Dubois. He was found dead that evening in his study, the half-eaten lavender truffle beside him. The coroner confirmed arsenic, but the remaining truffles in the box were untainted. The patisserie's staff to assistants, a delivery boy, and Madame Dubois herself claimed no knowledge of tampering. The police suspected a random act, but Poirot's eyes gleamed with skepticism. Random? Nan. A crime so precise is never without purpose. Poirot began his investigation in the patisserie's kitchen, a bustling space of copper pots and sugary air. He examined the truffle-making station, noting the meticulous order: bowls of melted chocolate, vials of lavender essence, and a tray of cooling moulds. Nothing appeared amiss, yet Poirot's mind churned. The little grey cells, they must work, he murmured, tapping his temple. The poison was in one truffle, not all. This suggests intention, not accident. He questioned the staff. The first assistant, Pierre, a wiry young man with ink-stained fingers, claimed he'd been shaping pralines all morning. The second, Mademoiselle Louise, a sharp-eyed woman with a tight bun, said she'd been decorating cakes in the front shop. The delivery boy, Tommy, a gangly lad with a nervous grin, swore he'd only handled sealed boxes. Madame Dubois herself had been in her office, tallying accounts. Each alibi was plausible, yet Poirot sensed a thread of discord, like a note out of tune. Returning to the front counter, Poirot requested the sales ledger. Madame Dubois hesitated, but complied, revealing that Mr. Vance was a regular, always purchasing the lavender truffles. He said they reminded him of his childhood in Provence, she noted. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And who knew of this preference? Madame. She listed a few regulars, including a rival confectioner, Monsieur Gaston Leclerc, whose shop across town had recently lost customers to Madame Dubois' rising fame. Poirot's next move was to reconstruct the timeline. Mr. Vance arrived at 10:15 a.m., purchased his truffles, and left. The box was sealed with Madame Dubois' signature wax stamp, unbroken when found. The arsenic fast-acting suggested the poison was ingested shortly before death. Poirot paced the shop, his polished shoes clicking on the tiles. The truffle was poisoned after it left the kitchen, but before it reached Mr. Vance's lips. How? The little grey cells, they must find the path. He turned his attention to the delivery process. Tommy, the delivery boy, mentioned that Mr. Vance's box had been set aside for pickup, as he often preferred. It sat on the counter for maybe an hour, Tommy said, scratching his head. Lots of folks came in that morning. Gaze flicked to the counter, where a small brass bell sat, its surface gleaming except for a faint smudge. He leaned closer, noting a powdery residue barely visible, but unmistakable to his trained eye. Mon Dieu, what is this? He muttered, scraping a sample into a handkerchief. Poirot sent the residue to a chemist friend, who confirmed traces of arsenic, diluted but present. The bell, handled by every customer who entered, was an unlikely vector, but it sparked a hypothesis. The poison, it was not in the kitchen, Poirot declared to a puzzled Madame Dubois. It was applied later in this very shop. Someone touched the truffle after it was boxed, before it was sealed. He gathered the staff and a few regular customers, including Monsieur Leclerc, who had arrived under the guise of offering condolences. Leclerc, a gaunt man with a waxed moustache rivaling Poirot's, exuded charm but avoided eye contact. Poirot began his interrogation with finesse, asking each person to describe their actions that morning. Pierre mentioned a spill he'd cleaned near the counter. Louise recalled a customer dropping a glove. Tommy admitted to sneaking a biscuit from the display. Leclerc claimed he'd been at his own shop, but his assistant, summoned by Poirot, faltered when asked to confirm the exact hours. Poirot's mind worked like a loom, weaving details into a pattern. The lavender truffle was unique, a target chosen for its association with Vance. The arsenic on the bell suggested a careless transfer. Someone handling poison had touched it. The unbroken wax seal implied the box was tampered with before sealing. He requested to see the sealing station, a small alcove where Madame Dubois personally applied her stamp. There, he noticed a faint scratch on the wax pot's rim, as if something had been dipped into it. Madame Poirot said, "Your wax, it is melted fresh each morning. Oui." She nodded. "And who has access to this alcove?" She hesitated. "Only me, and sometimes Pierre, if I'm busy." Poirot's eyes flicked to Pierre, whose fingers twitched. "Monsieur Pierre, you are a man of letters, are you not? Your fingers, they bear the ink of a writer. Perhaps you wrote a note to someone, offering a service." Pierre flushed, stammering, I don't know what you mean." But Poirot pressed on, his voice calm but unyielding. "You see, the arsenic on the bell, it came from hands that touched the truffle. The scratch on the wax pot suggests a Tula knife, perhaps used to open and reseal the box. And you, Pierre, you were near the counter, cleaning a spill that was no spill at all, but a moment to tamper." Under Poirot's relentless gaze, Pierre broke. "It was Leclerc," he cried. "He paid me to do it. He said Vance was ruining his business, praising Madame Dubois' truffles in the papers. I didn't mean for anyone to die, thought it was just a prank." Leclerc lunged for the door, but the constable, stationed there at Poirot's request, blocked his path. Leclerc's charm dissolved into a snarl. "You have no proof." Poirot held up the handkerchief with the arsenic residue. "The proof, monsieur, is in the details. The arsenic on the bell, the scratch on the wax pot, your assistant's uncertain alibi, these are the threads of your guilt. You used Pierre's desperation, knowing he needed money for his writing dreams. You chose the lavender truffle because you knew Vance's habits, learned from his boasts in your own shop." Madame Dubois gasped, her faith in her staff shattered. Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle. "Madame, your patisserie is safe. The truth has preserved it." To Pierre, he added, "You, monsieur, will face justice, but your honesty may lighten your burden." Leclerc was led away, his dreams of sabotage crushed. As the patisserie returned to its rhythm, Poirot sat with a cup of tisane, addressing the reader. "The little grey cells, they are your greatest ally. Observe, yes, but then think. Eliminate the impossible, organize the possible, and let logic guide you. A smudge, a scratch, a nervous glance, these are not random. They are the map to truth. Train your mind, and no mystery will elude you." The chapter closed with the patisserie's lights glowing through the fog, customers returning with cautious trust. Pierre, remorseful, faced a lesser charge, while Leclerc awaited trial. Madame Dubois gifted Poirot a box of untainted lavender truffles, which he accepted with a bow. The case was solved, not by chance, but by the disciplined power of the minder lesson for all who would follow in Poirot's footsteps. Chapter 3. The Art of Listening. Hearing the unspoken, the Orient Express rattled through the moonlit Alps. Its polished wood and velvet upholstery a cocoon of luxury amid the snowy wilderness. Hercule Poirot, seated in the dining car, sipped a glass of Burgundy, his sharp eyes scanning the passengers. He had boarded the train in Paris, invited by an old friend, Monsieur Bouc, the director of the Compagnie Internationale des Wagons, to consult on a delicate matter. A passenger, Madame Vivienne Laurent, a celebrated opera singer, had been found dead in her compartment, a jeweled dagger in her chest. The police at the next station would investigate, but Book feared scandal and begged Poirot to uncover the truth before the train's arrival. The dining car buzzed with subdued murmurs, the passengers' elegance masking their unease. Madame Laurent, a woman of fiery charisma, had dined among them the previous evening, her laughter ringing like a bell. Now her absence cast a pall. Book, his face lined with worry, leaned toward Poirot. "Monsieur, it appears a robbery. Emerald brooch is missing, but the compartment was locked from the inside, and no one saw an intruder. How can this be?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Monsieur Book, a locked door is but a challenge to the mind. The truth, it speaks not in shouts but in whispers. We must listen, truly listen, to hear it." He requested to see the compartment, and Book led him through the swaying train to the first-class carriage. Madame Laurent's compartment was a scene of restrained chaos. A silk shawl draped over a chair, a half-empty glass of champagne, and the dagger, its hilt encrusted with sapphires, still embedded in her chest. Poirot noted the window, tightly shut against the alpine chill, and the lock, intact but for a faint scratch near the keyhole. The emerald brooch, a gift from a Russian prince, was indeed gone. Yet something else caught Poirot's eye, a music box on the bedside table, its lid open, silent. He returned to the dining car, where the key suspects awaited: Monsieur André Duval, a French diplomat with a penchant for gambling; Lady Beatrice Harrow, an English widow with a sharp tongue; and Signor Marco Rossi, an Italian composer who had collaborated with Madame Laurent. Each claimed innocence, their stories polished but tense. Duval said he'd been in the smoking car all evening. Lady Harrow insisted she'd retired early, and Rossi swore he'd been composing in his compartment. Inspired by a melody he'd heard, Poirot began his inquiries, not with questions, but with silence. He sat, hands folded, letting the suspects speak, their words spilling like notes from an untuned piano. Duval boasted of a card game, mentioning a lively tune from the dining car's gramophone. Lady Harrow described her evening reading, but her voice faltered when she mentioned hearing a faint song through her compartment wall. Rossi, animated, spoke of his new opera, claiming he'd been lost in a melody he called L'Ombre d'Amour. Poirot's ears sharpened. "This melody, Signor Rossi, describe it, s'il vous plaît." Rossi hummed a haunting refrain, slow and mournful. Poirot's gaze flicked to the music box in his mind's eye. "Curio," he murmured. "Madame Laurent's music box plays a similar tune, yet it was silent when I saw it. Who wound it last night, and when did it stop?" He requested the passengers gather in the lounge car, where the gramophone stood silent. Poirot played a record, a lively jazz tune, and watched Duval's face. "Monsieur Duval, you said you heard this in the smoking car. Yet the gramophone was here, in the lounge, and the smoking car is too far to hear it clearly." Duval flushed, stammering about a mistake. Poirot turned to Lady Harrow. "Madame, you heard a song through your wall. Was it this jazz, or something softer, perhaps from a music box?" Lady Harrow's hands trembled. "It was ... softer, yes, like a lullaby." Poirot nodded, then addressed Rossi. "Signor, your melody, it matches the music box in Madame Laurent's compartment. You were there, were you not? Not composing, but listening to her final moments." Rossi's face paled, but he protested. "I was in my compartment. I heard nothing." Poirot raised a hand. Nan, Signor, you heard too much. The music box, it plays for precisely 3 minutes when wound. Madame Laurent died near midnight. Yet Lady Harrow heard its tune after 1 a.m. Someone rewound it after her death. Someone who knew its song. And you, Signor, your fingers, they bear the ink of a composer, but also the faint green of an emerald's patina. The passengers gasped as Poirot produced the emerald brooch, found tucked behind a cushion in Rossi's compartment. During a discreet search, you entered her compartment, Poirot continued, using a tool to pick the lock, leaving a scratch. You argued, perhaps over your opera's profits, which she controlled. In a moment of passion, you used her own dagger. You took the brooch to suggest robbery, but you could not resist winding the music box, a final tribute to your muse. Rossi's bravado crumbled. She was going to ruin me, he whispered. She demanded half my earnings, said my music was nothing without her voice. I didn't mean to kill her, just to scare her. Tears fell as he confessed, and Book signaled the conductor to summon the authorities at the next station. Poirot addressed the stunned passengers. To listen, Mies Amos, is to hear not just words, but their shadows. A melody out of place, a contradiction in a tale. These are the whispers of truth. Lady Harrow's song, Duval's false memory, Rossi. Ink-stained fingers, they spoke louder than their denials. He turned to the reader, his voice clear in the prose. Train your ears as you train your eyes. The truth hides in the pauses, the hesitations, the notes that do not belong. Listen, and the mystery will sing its secrets to you. The train rolled on, the Alps fading into dawn. Rossi was confined until the police arrived. The brooch returned to Madame Laurent's estate. Book, grateful, offered Poirot a lifetime of free passage, which he declined with a smile. The case was closed. The scandal contained, and the art of listening illuminated for those who would follow Poirot's path. Asterisk. Chapter 4. Questioning with finesse, the delicate interrogation. The golden light of late afternoon spilled through the tall windows of Haverford Hall, a Georgian manor nestled in the Cotswolds' rolling hills. Hercule Poirot, impeccable in a charcoal suit, stood in the library, where oak shelves groaned under leather-bound volumes. He had been summoned by Sir Henry Haverford, a retired diplomat whose furrowed brow betrayed his distress. The cause, a missing will, the last testament of Sir Henry's late sister, Lady Margaret, which had vanished from a locked safe during a family gathering. Without it, her fortune risked falling to an estranged nephew, Rupert, whose spendthrift ways alarmed the family. Sir Henry, his voice low, explained, Monsieur Poirot. The will was in the safe last night, seen by my wife and me. By morning, it was gone, no sign of tampering, no trace of the document. The family is in an uproar, and I fear accusations will tear us apart. Poirot's green eyes gleamed. Fear not, monsieur. The truth, it is like a shy bird, it must be coaxed, not startled. We shall find it with questions, gently posed. The safe, set into the library wall behind a portrait of Lady Margaret, was a modern contraption with a combination known only to Sir Henry and his wife, Lady Amelia. The gathered family included Rupert, a brash young man with a penchant for loud waistcoats, Miss Eleanor Haverford, Sir Henry's scholarly niece, who clutched a notebook, and Mr. Thomas Blake, the butler, whose stoic demeanour hid a flicker of unease. Poirot began his investigation not with demands, but with charm, his voice a velvet. Law, he sat in the drawing-room, a fire crackling, and invited the family to tea. Mies Amos, he began, his smile disarming. "Let us speak as friends. Tell me of last night's gathering. What did you enjoy?" Lady Amelia described a lively dinner, her hands fluttering as she mentioned Rupert's tales of London clubs. Eleanor spoke of a debate over Shakespeare, her eyes bright. Rupert boasted of winning at billiards, while Blake recalled serving port in the library. Poirot listened, his questions light as air. "And you, Mademoiselle Eleanor, did you linger in the library to admire the books?" Eleanor nodded, mentioning a rare folio she'd examined. Poirot's queries danced around the safe. "Monsieur Rupert, you are a man of energy. Did you perhaps explore the house after dinner?" Rupert grinned, admitting he'd wandered to the billiard room but saw nothing amiss. To Blake, Poirot mused, a butler sees all. Nan, did anyone approach the library late? Blake hesitated, then said he'd noticed Eleanor near the library door at midnight. Eleanor flushed, insisting she'd only fetched a book. The questions flowed like a waltz, each step calculated. Poirot asked Lady Amelia about the safe's combination, framing it as curiosity about modern security. She revealed it was changed weekly, written on a card kept in her jewelry box. "But only Henry and I know where it is," she added. Poirot's moustache twitched. "And this card, it is secure. We." Lady Amelia nodded, but her glance at Blake was fleeting, uncertain. Poirot requested to see the library again. The safe's lock was pristine, but he noticed a faint smudge on the portrait's frame, as if it had been tilted recently. He then visited Lady Amelia's room, where the jewelry box sat on a vanity. The card with the combination was there, but its edge was slightly creased, as if handled. Poirot's mind whirred. The will was taken by someone who knew the combination, but not from memory. The card, it was used. Returning to the drawing room, Poirot shifted his approach, his questions now probing, but still gentle. "Monsieur Blake, you are loyal. You served Lady Margaret for years. Did she ever speak of her wishes for her fortune?" Blake's jaw tightened. "She wanted it for charity, sir, not for ... wastrels." His glance at Rupert was sharp. Poirot nodded, then turned to Rupert. "And you, monsieur, did you know of your aunt's plans? Perhaps you sought to protect your interests?" Rupert bristled. "I didn't touch the safe. I was in the billiard room. Ask anyone." Poirot smiled. "I do not accuse, I inquire, but let us consider who else might benefit from the will's absence." He watched Eleanor, whose fingers tightened on her notebook. "Mademoiselle, you are a scholar. Did Lady Margaret's will mention your studies? Perhaps a fund for your research?" Eleanor's eyes widened. She expades he promised to support. "My work, but I'd never." Poirot raised a hand. "Of course, mademoiselle, but let us explore all possibilities." He turned to Blake, his tone conversational. "Monsieur Blake, you move silently, like a shadow. Did you, perhaps, check their safe to ensure its safety, using the card from Madame's box?" Blake's composure cracked. I only wanted to protect her wishes," he stammered. "Lady Margaret told me the new will gave everything to charity," cutting out Rupert. "He's a leech, squandering her legacy. I took the will to show Sir Henry, to convince him, but I meant to return it." He produced the document from his coat, its folds pristine. The family gasped, but Poirot's voice remained calm. "Monsieur Blake, your loyalty is admirable, but your method, it is flawed. You used the card, you tilted the portrait, you took the will not to steal, but to control. The truth, it cannot be forced, only revealed." He turned to Sir Henry. "Monsieur, The will is yours again. I trust you will honor your sister's wishes." Sir Henry, clutching the document, nodded. "Blake, you've served us well, but this was a grave error. We'll discuss your future." To Poirot, he added, "Your questions, monsieur, they uncovered what we couldn't see." Poirot bowed. "The art of questioning, monsieur, is to ask without accusing, to listen without judging. A gentle word opens the heart where a demand would close it." As the family dispersed, Poirot addressed the reader. "To question with finesse, you must be the mirror, not the hammer. Reflect the speaker's words, let them reveal themselves. The creased card, the smudged frame, the butler's loyalty, these spoke when I listened. Ask as a friend, and the truth will answer as one." The sun dipped below the hills, casting Haverford Hall in amber. Blake faced a reprimand, but kept his position, thanks to Poirot's plea for leniency. The will was restored, ensuring Lady Margaret's charitable legacy. The case closed, Poirot prepared for his next lesson, knowing that questions, when artfully posed, were the keys to any mystery. Chapter 5. The motive beneath the mask, understanding human nature. The village of St. Mary's Mead buzzed with the cheerful chaos of its annual summer fete. A riot of colourful bunting and the scent of freshly baked scones. The sun blazed. Over the green, where children darted between stalls and a brass band played a jaunty tune, Hercule Poirot, an unexpected guest invited by the local vicar, stood beneath a willow tree, his straw hat tilted against the glare. His presence had been requested after a tragedy. Miss Lavinia Gray, a spinster known for her prize roses, had been found dead in the mill pond, her body tangled in reeds. The coroner called it a drowning accident, but the vicar, Reverend Clement, suspected foul play. "Monsieur Poirot," he whispered, "Lavinia was no swimmer, and she feared water. This was no accident." Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the fate. "Monsieur le Reverend, the human heart is a labyrinth. To find the truth, we must seek the motive, greed, love, or perhaps revenge. Tell me of Miss Gray." The vicar described Lavinia as a quiet woman, wealthy from an inheritance, who had recently altered her will to favour a local charity over her family. Her death, on the eve of the fete, seemed too convenient. Poirot began his investigation at the mill pond, a serene spot fringed with wildflowers. The water was shallow, barely 4 feet deep, yet Lavinia's scarf was caught in the reeds, her glasses missing. He noted a faint trail of disturbed grass leading to a nearby copse, where a single rose petal lay, its crimson stark against the green curio. Poirot murmured, "A rose, out of place, speaks of intention." The suspects were gathered at the vicarage. Miss Clara Gray, Lavinia's cousin, a painter with a bohemian air. Mr. Edmund Walsh, a local farmer whose land bordered Lavinia's prized orchard. And Mrs. Beatrice Finch, the fate's organizer, whose bustling energy masked a nervous tic. Poirot sat with them over tea, his demeanour warm, inviting confidences. "Mademoiselle Clara, you shared Lavinia's love of art, Did you visit her garden often?" Clara nodded, her paint-stained fingers twisting a scarf. "We talked of roses, not money. I didn't care about her will." To Walsh, Poirot said, "Monsieur, your farm thrives, yet I hear Lavinia's orchard was to be sold for charity. Did this trouble you?" Walsh, a ruddy man with calloused hands, snorted. "Her land's no use to me. I have enough of my own." Mrs. Finch, pouring tea, chimed in unprompted. "Lavinia was generous, monsieur. She promised funds for the Fates Restoration project. Such a loss. Her voice trembled, but her eyes darted to Clara. Poirot's mind sifted their words, seeking the motive beneath their masks. He strolled to Lavinia's cottage, a quaint stone house surrounded by roses. Inside her desk held a draft of the new will, confirming the charity bequest. A photograph showed Clara and Lavinia in the orchard, but Clara's smile was strained. Poirot found a gardening journal, its final entry noting, "Clara upset about orchard sale. She dreams of painting there forever." The motive, he sensed, was not greed but something deeper. At the fete, Poirot mingled, his questions cloaked in casual chatter. To a stallholder, he asked, "Did Miss Grey seem herself yesterday?" The woman recalled Lavinia arguing with Clara near the pond, their voices sharp. Another villager mentioned Walsh inspecting the orchard's boundary, muttering about lost opportunities. Mrs. Finch, overseeing a cake stall, avoided Poirot's gaze when he asked about her last talk with Lavinia. Returning to the pond, Poirot examined the grass trail again. The rose petal led to a hidden bench in the copse, where a pair of glasses Lavinias, rimmed in gold, lay, half buried in leaves. Nearby, a paintbrush bristle, flecked with crimson, caught his eye. "The little grey cells, they connect the dots," he murmured. The bristle matched Clara's paints, used for her vibrant landscapes. Poirot gathered the suspects at the vicarage, his tone grave but kind. "Mies Amos, a crime is driven by the heart's desires. Miss Grey's death was no accident. She was pushed, her glasses lost in a struggle. The rose petal, the paintbrush bristle, they point to one who loved her orchard, not for its wealth, but for its beauty." He turned to Clara. "Mademoiselle, you argued with Lavinia. You wished to keep the orchard for your art. When she refused, your passion turned to despair." Clara's face crumpled. "I didn't mean to hurt her." She sobbed. "We fought by the ponchi, said the orchard must go to charity. I pushed her, just to stop her walking away, but she fell into the water. I tried to save her, but she sank." Tears streamed as she confessed, the weight of guilt lifting. Walsh and Mrs. Finch stared, shocked, as Poirot nodded. The motive? It was love for a place, twisted into rage. You hid her glasses, hoping to mask the struggle, but the truth, it always speaks. Reverend Clement called the constable, who took Clara gently into custody. Poirot addressed the vicar. "Monsieur, her crime was not planned, but born of a moment's fury. She will face justice, but her heart was not cruel." To the reader, he added, "The motive, it hides behind smiles and tears. Greed, love, revenge, these are the fires that burn within. Study the heart, and you will find the why behind the crime." The fate continued, its joy tempered by truth. Clara's confession ensured Lavinia's will was honoured, her orchard. Funding the charity, the village mourned, but Poirot's clarity brought peace. As he left St. Mary's Mead, the sun setting behind the willows, he prepared to share his next lesson, knowing that understanding human nature was the key to unravelling any mystery. Chapter 6. The clue in context. Reading the scene, the Parisian sky, was a canvas of twilight blues as Hercule Poirot stepped into the Galerie d'Art Moderne, a sleek establishment on the left bank where the city's elite gathered to admire avant-garde masterpieces. The gallery's director, Madame Celeste Dubois, had summoned Poirot in a state of near hysteria. A painting, Let Toil Diminuate, a luminous work by a reclusive artist, had vanished from a locked display room during a private viewing. The theft threatened the gallery's reputation, and Madame Dubois begged Poirot to recover the masterpiece before the press caught wind. Poirot, his patent leather shoes gleaming, surveyed the gallery's marble halls. "Madame," he said, his voice smooth as the Seine, "a clue is like a star, it shines only when seen against the night. We must place each detail in its context to find the truth." Madame Dubois, her silk scarf fluttering with nerves, recounted the evening. A select group of patrons, a secure room, and a painting that vanished without a trace. The door's lock was untouched, the windows sealed, and the security guard, stationed outside, swore no one had entered. The display room was a fortress of modern design, its walls bare save for the empty space where L'Etoile diminuate had hung. Poirot's eyes swept the scene: polished oak floors, a single chandelier casting geometric shadows, and a faint smudge on the floor near the wall of footprint, partial and blurred, in a shade of dust that didn't match the pristine room. "Curio," he murmured, crouching to examine it. The dust was gritty, like that of an attic, not the gallery's polished surfaces. Madame Dubois introduced the key figures: Monsieur Victor Langer, a wealthy collector with a penchant for bold art; Mademoiselle Sophie Renaud, a young curator with an encyclopedic knowledge of the gallery's works; and Monsieur Paul Durand, the security guard, whose gruff demeanour hid a nervous twitch. Poirot began his inquiries, his questions framed as musings. "Monsieur Langer, you admired the painting, oui. Did you linger to study its details?" Langer, adjusting his gold cufflinks, said he'd left early for a dinner engagement. Sophie claimed she'd been cataloguing in her office, while Durand insisted he'd never left his post. Poirot returned to the footprint, its context nagging at him. The gallery was cleaned daily, yet this dust suggested neglect. He requested access to the attic above the display room, a space Madame Dubois described as storage for old frames and canvases. The attic was dim, its air thick with dust that matched. The footprints grit. A trapdoor in the corner led directly to the display room below, its hinges oiled and silent. Poirot's moustache twitched. The thief, they did not break in, they descended. He examined the attic further, finding a crumpled ticket stub from a Montmartre café, dated the previous day. The context was forming. The thief had planned their route, using the attic to bypass the locked door. Poirot questioned Sophie again, his tone casual. "Mademoiselle, you know the gallery's every corner. This attic, it is used often." Sophie hesitated, her fingers brushing a silver locket. "Rarely, monsieur. It's mostly forgotten." Poirot's gaze shifted to Durand, noting a faint dust mark on his uniform's cuff. "Monsieur Durand, you are vigilant, yet this dust it clings to you. Did you perhaps check the attic for security?" Durand's twitch intensified. I patrol the building, but not there." Poirot nodded, then turned to Langer. "And you, monsieur? Your dinner in Montmartre, was it at Caf, Lumière, perhaps?" He held up the ticket stub, watching Lang's face pale. The pieces clicked in Poirot's mind. He gathered the suspects. In the display room, his voice calm but commanding. "Mise Amos, a clue without context is a note without a melody. This footprint, it comes from the attic where the thief entered through the trapdoor. The ticket stub places Monsieur Langer in Montmartre, near a café whose dust matches our clue. But the true mastermind is not Langer nor Durand, but Mademoiselle Sophie." Sophie gasped, her locket slipping from her fingers. Poirot continued, "You, mademoiselle, knew the attic's trapdoor, a secret you kept as curator. You staged the theft, not for profit, but to expose the gallery's lax security, which you had begged Madame Dubois to improve. You used Lang's ticket stub, dropped carelessly at a viewing, to mislead us. Durand's dust came from a brief attic check, but you, Sophie, you planned the descent. Hiding the painting to force change. Sophie's shoulders slumped. I meant no harm, she whispered. The gallery's reputation was at risk. Burglars had scouted us before. I hid Latoile in the attic, planning to find it later, to prove my point. She led them to the painting, concealed behind a stack of frames. Madame Dubois, torn between fury and relief, clutched the canvas. Poirot addressed her. Madame. Mademoiselle Sophie's motive was noble, if misguided. Her punishment, perhaps, should be a chance to reform your security. To the reader, he said, a clue is nothing without its stage, dust. The ticket, the trapdoor, they speak only when placed in their world. Study the context, and the mystery will unfold like a map. The gallery's lights glowed as Diminuate was restored to its wall. Sophie faced a reprimand, but kept her post, tasked with overhauling security. Langer and Durand, cleared of theft, returned to their lives, chastened. Poirot, satisfied, left the gallery, ready to impart his next lesson in the art of detection. Chapter 7. The Art of Disguise. Seeing through deceptions, the grand ballroom of the Hotel Royal in Monte. Carlo shimmered with opulence, its mirrored walls reflecting a kaleidoscope of masked revelers. The annual masquerade ball, a glittering affair for Europe's elite, was in full swing, with chandeliers casting a golden glow over swirling gowns and feathered masks. Hercule Poirot, resplendent in a black domino mask and a tailored evening suit, moved through the crowd with the grace of a panther. He had been invited by the hotel's manager, Monsieur Leclerc, to investigate a delicate matter. A financier, Monsieur Henry Dubois, was being blackmailed with compromising letters, and the culprit was believed to be among the masked guests. Leclerc, a wiry man with a nervous air, met Poirot in a private alcove. Monsieur Poirot, the letters threatened to expose Dubois' financial missteps. He received a note tonight, demanding payment by midnight, slipped under his suite's door. The blackmailer is here, hiding behind a mask. Poirot's eyes gleamed behind his own disguise. Monsieur, a mask conceals the face, but not the soul. We shall unmask this villain by seeing through their deception. Poirot began his investigation in the ballroom, where the air was thick with perfume and intrigue. The note, which Leclerc showed him, was written in a florid script on heavy cream paper, demanding 50,000 francs be left in a potted palm by the terrace. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but Poirot noted a faint ink smudge on the edge, as if the writer had pressed too hard. He mingled among the guests, his senses attuned to the subtlest cues. A laugh too forced, a gesture too stiff, a mask misaligned. The suspects were three figures close to Dubois: Madame Celeste Varron, a socialite with a peacock feather mask and a reputation for sharp wit; Signor Antonio Bellini, an opera singer whose lion mask matched his booming voice; and Mademoiselle Elise Moreau, a journalist in a silver cat mask, known for her investigative scoops. Poirot approached each with charm, his questions veiled as compliments. To Celeste, he said, "Madame, your mask is exquisite. Does it reflect your love for rare treasures?" She laughed, admitting a fondness for collecting secrets as well as jewels. To Bellini, Poirot remarked, "Signor, your voice carries such power, does it ever tire of the stage's demands?" Bellini shrugged, his mask's mane fraying slightly. At the edges, a sign of where Poirot noted. With Elise, he mused. Mademoiselle, a journalist, sees all did. You observe anyone near Monsieur Dubois' suite tonight? Elise's eyes flickered behind her mask. I was dancing, monsieur, but I saw a figure in a red cloak near the corridor. Poirot's mind catalogued these details. Celeste's love of secrets, Bellini's worn mask, Elise's quick deflection. He visited Dubois' suite, finding the door's lock unforced but a faint scratch on the keyhole, suggesting a practiced hand. A discarded feather, peacock blue, lay near the threshold, but Poirot dismissed it as too obvious. Instead, he focused on a trace of wax on the carpet, red and waxy, like sealing wax but softer, as if from a costume prop. Returning to the ballroom, Poirot watched the dancers, noting their movements. Bellini's stride was heavy, his boots leaving. Faint scuffs on the polished floor. Celeste glided, her gown pristine, but her gloves slightly ink-stained, a detail hidden by her mask's flourish. Elise moved with a journalist's alertness, her silver mask slightly askew. Revealing a scar on her temple, a mark Poirot recognized from a past encounter with a disgraced reporter. Elise's former colleague, he requested a private meeting with the suspects in Leclerc's office, where a gramophone played softly. Mise et Miss Poirot began. A disguise is a lie told by the body, but it cannot hide the truth from the little grey cells. The blackmailer slipped a note under Monsieur Dubois' door, but they left traces, wax from a costume, a scratch from a lockpick, and a voice that does not match its mask. He turned to Bellini. Signor, your mask is worn, as if reused from many nights, but your voice, it falters when you speak of Dubois. Bellini blustered. I sing, not scheme. Poirot nodded, then addressed Celeste. Madame, your gloves bear ink, yet you claim no knowledge of writing. Curious, Nan. Celeste laughed, but her hands trembled. Finally, he faced Elise. Mademoiselle, your scar betrays you. You were once Mademoiselle Claire Dupont, dismissed for forging documents. You knew Dubois' secrets from your reporting days, and you used a red wax prop to seal your note, leaving a trace on his carpet. Elise's mask slipped as she lunged for the door, but Leclerc blocked her. You can't prove it, she spat. Poirot held up the note, its smudge matching her gloves. The wax, the scratch, your scar, these are your true face. You blackmailed Dubois to revive your career, using your journalist's access to slip into his suite during the ball's chaos. Elise confessed, her voice breaking. He ruined my name years ago. I wanted justice. Poirot handed the letters, retrieved from Elise's room, to Dubois, who sighed with relief. Mademoiselle, justice is not vengeance, Poirot said. Your disguise fooled many, but not Hercule Poirot. Leclerc summoned the gendarmes, and Elise was led away. To the reader, Poirot declared, a disguise is a fragile thing. Study the details that do not fit, the worn mask, the stained glove, the scar revealed. Peel back the layers, and the truth will stand bare. The ball continued, its glamour undimmed. Dubois, freed from his tormentor, donated generously to the hotel's charity fund. Poirot, declining a glass of champagne, left the Royale, his mind already on the next lesson in the art of detection. Chapter 8. Timing is everything. The rhythm of crime, the cliffs of Cornwall, loomed over the churning sea, their jagged edges softened by the mist rolling in from the Atlantic. Hercule Poirot stood on the terrace of Cliffside Villa, a stark, modernist retreat owned by Sir Reginald Thorne, a shipping magnate with a penchant for privacy. The salty breeze tugged at Poirot's overcoat as he gazed at the horizon, his moustache as precise as ever. He had been summoned by Sir Reginald's wife, Lady Victoria. After a grim discovery, Sir Reginald's secretary, Miss Abigail Wells, had been found dead in her room. A pistol beside her, the scene staged to suggest suicide. Lady Victoria, her eyes red from tears, insisted it was murder. Monsieur Poirot, Abigail, was vibrant, ambitious she would never take her own life. Someone did this, and they're still here. Poirot, his green eyes, sharp, nodded. Madame, a crime is like. A symphony's notes must be timed perfectly to reveal the composer. We shall find the rhythm of this tragedy. The villa, isolated on its cliff, housed a small gathering. Sir Reginald, gruff and distracted. His business partner, Mr. Lionel Gray, a sleek man with a calculating smile, and Miss Fiona Drake, a novelist researching Sir Reginald's empire. The staff included only a cook, Mrs. Harrow, and a groundskeeper, Tom. Both shaken by the death, Poirot began in Abigail's room, where the air was heavy with the scent of gunpowder. The pistol, a small silver revolver, lay near her hand, and a note in her tidy script read, "I cannot go on." Yet Poirot's gaze lingered on the window, open to the sea breeze, and a faint scuff on the sill, as if someone had climbed through. The clock on the mantel, stopped at 10:47 p.m., suggested the time of death, but the coroner's report, delivered by a local doctor, placed it closer to 11 p.m. based on body temperature. A discrepancy, Poirot murmured, and timing. It is never wrong. He questioned the household, his tone measured. Sir Reginald, you worked late with Mademoiselle Wells. We. The magnate nodded, saying they'd reviewed contracts until 10:30 p.m. when Abigail retired. Gray claimed he'd been in the study, drafting a merger proposal, while Fiona said she'd walked the cliffs, inspired by the moonlit waves. Mrs. Harrow, preparing dinner, heard a shot around 10:45 p.m. And Tom, tending the garden, saw no one near Abigail's window. Poirot's mind seized on the timeline. The stopped clock suggested a staged scene, but the open window and scuff mark hinted at an outsider, or someone posing as one. He examined the tide charts on Sir Reginald's desk, noting the high tide, at 10:50 p.m., would have covered the rocks below the cliff, making an external escape plausible but risky. The killer, they used the tide to their advantage, he mused, but they misjudged the clock. In the study, Poirot found a ledger detailing a disputed merger between Thorne and Gray's companies. Abigail, as secretary, had access to sensitive figures, including evidence of Gray's creative accounting. A torn page, tucked in a drawer, bore Abigail's initials and a note, "LG irregularities." Poirot's eyes narrowed. The motive, it emerges greed and the fear of exposure. He gathered the household on the terrace, the sea roaring below. Mies Amos, timing is the pulse of truth. Mademoiselle Wells was killed not at 10:47, as the clock suggests, but closer to 11 o'clock, when the tide was high, allowing a killer to escape. Via the cliff path. The clock was stopped to mislead us. He turned to Gray. "Monsieur, you were not drafting proposals. You were in Abigail's room. She discovered your financial deceit, and you could not let her speak." Gray's smile faltered nonsense. "I was in the study." Poirot raised a hand. "The scuff on the sill, it matches your polished boots, monsieur, worn from your climb. You shot Abigail, staged the note, and stopped the clock, but you forgot the tide's rhythm. At 10:47, the rocks were exposed. Your escape would have been impossible. By 11 o'clock, the tide hid your path. Gray lunged for the cliff's edge, but Tom, quick on his feet, restrained him. She was going to ruin me, Gray spat. Those figures, she'd have told Thorne everything. Poirot nodded, his voice calm. You killed to silence her. But the tide, it betrayed you. Lady Victoria, clutching the ledger, wept for Abigail's loyalty. The constable, summoned from the village, took Gray into custody. Poirot addressed Lady Victoria. Madame, your friend's honour is restored. The truth, it is in the timing. To the reader, he said, the rhythm of a crime its minutes, its moments reveals the hand that plays it. A clock, a tide, a scuff, these are the beats of justice. Study the tempo, and the mystery will dance before you. The villa settled into quiet as the mist thickened. Abigail's memory was honoured with a memorial fund, and Sir Reginald vowed to reform his business. Poirot, gazing at the sea, prepared for his next lesson, knowing that timing was the silent partner of every crime. Chapter 9. The web of connections, linking the unlikely. The fog draped Vienna like a velvet curtain, muffling the clatter of horse-drawn carriages along the Ringstrasse. Hercule Poirot, wrapped in a woolen scarf against the autumn chill, stepped into the grand foyer of the Hotel Imperial, where chandeliers cast a warm glow over marble floors. He had been summoned by the Austrian ambassador, Herr Franz von Keller, to investigate a crisis, the disappearance of a British diplomat, Sir Edward Langley, from a locked suite during a high-stakes conference on European trade. The ambassador, his face etched with worry, met Poirot in a private salon. Monsieur Poirot, Sir Edward vanished last night. No trace, no ransom demand. The conference is in chaos, and war could loom if he's not found. Poirot's eyes, sharp as cut glass, surveyed the room. Herr von Keller, a mystery is a web, its threads seemingly unconnected until the mind weaves them together. We shall find Sir Edward by linking the unlikely. The suite, a lavish affair of gilt mirrors and silk drapes, offered few clues. A locked door, a sealed window, and a half-smoked cigarette in an ashtray, its brand English and rare. Poirot noted a stray button on the carpet, brass with a naval insignia, and a faint smudge of ink on the desk, as if a pen had leaked. The suspects were 3 conference attendees: Frau Ingrid Bauer, a German trade negotiator with a steely gaze; Monsieur Claude Renaud, a French envoy with a penchant for cryptic remarks; and Miss Evelyn Hart, an English translator whose nervous smile belied her calm voice. Poirot began his inquiries, his questions light but piercing. Frau Bauer, you worked closely with Sir Edward. Did he seem distracted? She admitted he'd been agitated, mentioning a coded message he'd received. Renaud, twirling a pen, claimed he'd been in the hotel bar, hearing an odd phrase, the eagle's shadow, from a stranger. Evelyn said she'd been translating documents in her room. Unaware of any trouble, Poirot's mind seized on the clues: the button, the cigarette, the ink smudge, and Renault's phrase. He examined the suite again, finding a crumpled paper in the waste-bin, bearing a coded sequence of numbers and the words eagle's shadow. The code, when deciphered using a simple substitution cipher, revealed a meeting time midnight, a location, the hotel's old service tunnel. The web it forms, Poirot murmured, noting the tunnel's entrance was near the laundry, accessible only to staff and a few guests. He questioned the hotel porter. Hans, who recalled seeing a man in a naval coat near the tunnel entrance. At midnight, he dropped something, a button. Maybe, Hans said, pointing to his own brass-buttoned uniform. Poirot's gaze sharpened. The button on the carpet matched Hans's, but its thread was frayed, suggesting it was torn off deliberately. He visited the laundry, finding a trace of cigarette ash on a folded towel. The same English brand as Sir Edward's. Poirot's inquiries deepened. To Renaud, he said, "Monsieur, this eagle's shadow, you heard it casually, yet it matches Sir Edward's coded note. A coincidence?" Renaud shrugged, but his pen, leaking ink, matched the desk smudge. To Evelyn, Poirot mused, "Mademoiselle, your translations included Sir Edward's trade proposals. None. Did you see his code?" Evelyn's smile faltered, her fingers twisting a handkerchief embroidered with an eagle motif. The threads converged. Poirot gathered the suspects in the salon, the ambassador watching anxiously, Mies Amos. A crime is a tapestry of connections. The button, torn from a naval coat, suggests a disguise. The cigarette ash links to Sir Edward, but its presence in the laundry points to a staged disappearance. The coded note, with its phrase, "eagle's shadow," ties to Mademoiselle Hart's handkerchief and Monsieur Renaud's overheard remark. Together they weave a plot. He turned to Renaud. "Monsieur, you are no mere envoy. You are a foreign agent, tasked with disrupting the conference. You used the code to lure Sir Edward to the tunnel, where you abducted him, leaving the cigarette to suggest he fled. The button, torn from a borrowed porter's coat, was your error, as was the ink from your pen." Renaud's face hardened, but Poirot continued, facing Evelyn. "Mademoiselle, you supplied the code, betraying Sir Edward for a promise of wealth. Your eagle handkerchief betrays your complicity." Renaud lunged for the door, but the ambassador's guards stopped him. Evelyn, trembling, confessed, "They promised me a fortune. I gave them the code, but I didn't know they'd harm him." She revealed Sir Edward's location, a hidden basement room beneath the hotel. Poirot led the guards there, finding Sir Edward bound but unharmed, his relief palpable as he was freed. Herr von Keller clasped Poirot's hand. "You've saved the conference, monsieur." Poirot bowed. "The web of connections, Herr, it catches the guilty. A button, an ash, a phrase, these are the threads that bind the truth." To the reader, he said, "Link the unlikely, test the pattern, and the mystery unravels. Every clue is a thread. Follow it, and the web will lead you to justice." The fog lifted as Sir Edward resumed his duties. The conference saved. Renaud faced extradition. Evelyn, a lesser charge for her cooperation. Poirot, his scarf tight against the chill, left the Imperial, ready to share his final lesson in the art of detection. Chapter 10. The Final Deduction. Crafting justice with elegance. The quiet streets of Oxford whispered with history. Their ancient stones bathed in the soft glow of dusk. Hercule Poirot, his silver-headed cane tapping a steady rhythm, entered. The Quill's Rest, a bookshop tucked between ivy-clad colleges. Its shelves brimmed with rare manuscripts and dusty tomes, a sanctuary for scholars and dreamers. Poirot had been summoned by the shop's owner, Miss Agatha Wren, a sharp-witted woman whose love for books rivaled her distrust of deceit. A crime had shattered the shop's peace. Mr. Lawrence Finch, a reclusive collector, lay dead in the reading room, a rare medieval manuscript missing from its locked case. The police deemed it a robbery gone wrong, but Miss Wren suspected murder, and Poirot, intrigued by her plea, agreed to investigate. "Madame Wren," Poirot said, his mustache pristine despite the evening's chill. The final deduction is the crescendo of our symphony. It requires all our skills, observation, logic, empathy, to craft justice with elegance. The reading room, a cozy nook with leather armchairs and a flickering fireplace, held the scene of the crime. Finch's body, slumped over a table, bore a single stab wound, inflicted by a letter opener engraved with a quill. The manuscript case, its lock intact, stood empty, and a spilled glass of port stained the rug. It sent sharp in the air. Poirot's eyes swept the room, a smudged footprint near the hearth, too small for Finch. A torn page corner beneath a chair, its vellum matching the missing manuscript, and a faint trace of lavender perfume out of place in the musty shop. The clues, they sing, he murmured, but we must listen to their harmony, Miss Wren. Introduce the suspects. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a historian researching the manuscript. Mr. Julian Crane, a rival collector with a sharp tongue. And Miss Beatrice Lyle, Finch's assistant, whose quiet demeanour hid a trembling hand. Poirot began with observation, noting Evelyn's ink-stained cuffs, Julian's polished boots, and Beatrice's lavender-scented handkerchief. He questioned them gently, his voice a soothing balm. Dr. Marsh, your passion for history is renowned, Monsieur Finch. Share your zeal for the manuscript. Evelyn admitted Finch guarded it jealously, refusing her access. Julian, smirking, claimed he'd been browsing novels, uninterested in Finch's dusty relic. Beatrice said she'd been cataloguing in the back, hearing only a muffled cry. Logic guided Poirot's next step. The footprint, delicate and narrow, suggested a woman's shoe, ruling out Julian. The torn vellum, found near Evelyn's usual chair, hinted at a struggle, but the lock's pristine state puzzled him. He examined the case, finding a hidden catcher, secret mechanism known only to Finch and his assistant. The thief knew the case's secret, Poirot mused, but the murder, it speaks of passion, not greed. Empathy shaped his inquiries. To Beatrice, he said, Mademoiselle, you worked closely with Monsieur Finch. Did he ever wound your heart, perhaps? Beatrice's eyes welled. He was kind once, but he changed mocked my dreams of writing. Poirot nodded, sensing a motive deeper than theft. He revisited the crime scene, noticing the port glasses position tipped, not dropped, as if placed deliberately. The lavender scent clung to Beatrice's chair, stronger than her handkerchief warranted. Poirot gathered the suspects in the reading room, the fire casting shadows on their faces. Mies Amos, the final deduction weaves all threads observation, logic, empathy into truth. The footprint, it is Mademoiselle Beatrice's, too small for another. The vellum, torn in a struggle, points to her presence. The lavender it betrays her proximity to the crime, but the motive, it is not. The manuscript, it is the heart. He faced Beatrice, his tone gentle but firm. Mademoiselle, you loved Monsieur Finch, but he spurned you, belittled your dreams. Last night you confronted him, seeking the manuscript to fund your writing. He refused, mocked you, and in a moment of rage, you used the letter opener. You staged the theft, opening the case with the secret catch, but your heart betrayed you. With the scent of lavender and the careful placement of the glass. Beatrice collapsed into a chair, sobbing. He laughed at me, called my stories worthless. I didn't mean to kill him, I just wanted the manuscript to start anew. She revealed its hiding place, tucked behind a shelf of poetry. Miss Wren, her face a mix of shock and pity, retrieved the vellum, its illuminated script glowing in the firelight. Poirot addressed her. Madame, justice must be served, but with compassion. Mademoiselle Beatrice's crime was born of a broken heart, not malice. To the reader, he said, the final deduction is an art, blending what you see, what you reason, and what you feel. The footprint, the vellum, the lavender, they are notes in a melody of truth. Present your findings with clarity, but let empathy guide your hand, for justice without kindness is but half a victory. The police, summoned by Miss Wren, took Beatrice gently into custody, her confession easing her burden. The manuscript was restored, and Finch's estate funded a scholarship in his name, honouring his love for books. Poirot lingered in the bookshop, his fingers tracing a volume of poetry. The case was closed, the truth unveiled with elegance, and his lessons complete. As he stepped into Oxford's twilight, he felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing his methods would guide future detectives to craft justice with grace,